Our story today is from the country of Japan, where sometimes giant creators called Kaiju come to the fore, who are considered to be the greatest enemies of humanity. Despite this, the people here live their normal lives without any fear and hesitation, because a force called Defense Force is always engaged in their security, without caring for their lives. On one such day, a giant kaiju of 60 meters was seen in the city of Yokohama, whose fortitude was 3.5. This fortitude represents the strength of kaiju. A Kaiju alert was sounded across the city, and the area was being evacuated as soon as possible. The body of this kaiju was so big and powerful that even the attack of missiles on it was proving futile. Just then, a team of the 3rd Division of the Defense Force reaches the spot. The officers of the team were very capable in their work, and their weapons were so powerful that they ripped off Kaiju's body. One of them devastated Kaiju's core, causing him to completely disintegrate. This is followed by the MC of our story, Kafka Hibino, who was eating a burger. Kafka is a cleaner whose job is to clean the leftover pieces of Kaiju. The people of the city were celebrating the victory of the 3rd Division, and this news was also being broadcast on national TV. At the same time, Kafka was also passing by and stops after hearing a name, Captain Mina, who had killed that huge Kaiju. People take Kafka's cleaning work lightly, but this work is also no less than another war against Kaiju. If not taken care of properly, people can get injured. Despite this, Kafka's work is not given any importance. All credit goes to the defense forces. Kafka today realizes that he has been given the task of cleaning the intestine, which is one of the most difficult tasks. Everyone runs away from this work because during the cleaning of the intestines of Kaiju in it, there is an encounter with stool, which kills hunger for several days. Kafka hates this job, even though it gives him good money, food, and a house. He was trying to convince himself that his work was also important. That's when he sees Captain Mina on TV, and here we get to know 2 shocking things. First, Mina is the captain of the 3rd Division and is the most popular in the whole country. Secondly, Kafka was his childhood friend who wanted to join the defense force with him, but he got stuck in this cleaning job. The next day, when Kafka goes to his job, he meets a new employer named Reno, who had just joined the job part-time. Reno also intended to join the defense force. A friend of Kafka's tells Reno that Kafka also once wanted to join the defense force, but now he has given up. Reno asks Kafka the reason for his defeat. Kafka, becoming a little cooler, says that he tried his best, but someone always turns out to be stronger than him, so he gave up. He tells the boy that I never give up, and he leaves from there. After that, Kafka was thinking, is it so bad to give up? Today, on the first day of Reno, the same intestine is given the task, which Kafka was heartened to hear, but he is also assigned the same task. Kafka argues a little with his boss, but at the end, he gives in. His boss says that even though Kafka throws tantrums, he does everything well. If he could join the defense force, he would have done well there too. He had heard it too, and then after work. Reno's condition worsens, and Kafka was laughing when he saw this, but his own condition was also bad. Kafka gives Reno a vitamin pack, because after this work, hunger dies. He also advises Reno to close the nose to avoid bad breath, but Reno refuses to wear it, but he begins to force her to wear it, after which by the evening, both of them were tired of their work. Only then Reno comes to Kafka, seeing which he starts bursting that somewhere he is not coming to take revenge from me. And then he thanks her, because with his help, he was able to work so far. Then Reno tells that the age limit to apply in the defense force has now been reduced to 32. He says he saw the sadness on Kafka's face when he said he had given up, but if Kafka wants to try again, there is still a chance for him. Reno's words give Kafka new hope, but then suddenly another, smaller version of Kaiju, Yojo, attacks from behind them. Kafka saves Reno with great difficulty by going to his mother and tells him to run away and get help. Yojo is the Kaiju that comes out of the larger Kaiju. After this, Reno is reluctant to leave Kafka alone, but Kafka says that his life is not important while Reno wants to join the defense force and save people, so he has to stay alive. Reino then leaves Kafka's side, and Kafka tries to distract Yozo and take him away from Reno. Then somehow, he enters a building and comes out by breaking the window. The story then moves to Kafka's past, where his city was destroyed by a giant kaiju. Mina's cat was also killed in the attack. Both Mina and Kafka had decided in childhood that they would join the defense force and face kaijus. Kafka used to worry about Mina and try to stop her from going to the defense force, but both of them challenged each other as to who would become a better defense force officer. The story comes back to the present, where Yozo vandalized the building. Kafka decided to confront Yozo directly, but he did not last a moment and was about to become Yozo's victim when suddenly Reno arrived and saved Kafka. Reno explains that help is also going to arrive soon. Kafka's leg was broken, but he still asks Reno why he returned. Reno replies that if he had run away today, he would never have been able to become a defense force officer. That's when Kafka remembers his failure, when he failed for defense force officer. He asks himself why he fails in everything. He spread out for the defense force, he has delivered on his promise, and now it's spreading to save Reno. Suddenly, a white tiger arrives and rips off Yozo's hand, smashing his head in one shot. The attack was carried out by Captain Mina Ashiro of the 3rd Division, a childhood friend of Kafka. Kafka's eyes then open in the hospital, where he is thinking about Mina and how strong she has become. Just then Reno, who was in the bed next to him, says thank you to Kafka, because if it wasn't for him today, his dead body would have been lying on that bed. Hearing this, Kafka remembers his promise to Mina that he will become the best defense force officer. Suddenly, Kafka hits himself, saying that it's not wrong to give up, but it's wrong to stop by lying to yourself. He decides his next step. Just then, he sees a strange creature who may have been looking for him. Only then does that creativity enter his mouth. Kafka's condition begins to deteriorate, and when Reno removes the curtain, he sees a kaiju in Kafka's place. Kafka is surprised by his own appearance. Just then, an old man sees Kafka and calls the defense force. That's when the story goes back to the past, where we see Mina and Kafka. Little Mina was afraid of kaijus. She was afraid of his name. But Kafka comforted her that he would always be with her. Mina was remembering these old things, and he lied to Kafka. The story then returns to the present, where the 3rd Division receives news that Kaiju has appeared in the hospital, and they were going to kill him. Here in the hospital, Reno asks Kafka to smile so that the old man feels that he is not in any danger from them. But Kafka's smile was so frightening that the old man plunges there. Kafka goes to help him, but his touch breaks the wall. Now Kafka had a rupture, and then the rest of the patients of the hospital also see him. Now Kafka and Reno will have to flee before the defense force arrives. Now Kafka tries to open the window, but the whole wall opens along with the window. He now begins to lose control of his body and finds it difficult to stop himself. He tries to reduce this pressure from his body. The defense force had received information that Kaiju had escaped from the hospital. There were a lot of questions going on in Reno's mind, and as he turned back to ask her, he could see strange creations coming out of Kafka's body. Then a creator comes out of his mouth who had eaten the live bird. Then he recovers on his own, and then he feels strong while running, and only then he lightens it with his nipples while running. And then he realizes that he is no longer a man, and now he will never be able to fulfill his bed wish. And when he thinks about it, he falls to the ground, to which Reno explains to him that there is no time for all this. Then they start going to a closed area to protect themselves. But then suddenly, Kafka hears a strange sound, and that's when the radar gets a signal of another kaiju, which comes from below the ground. After that, the defense force team is divided into 2 parts. And here, Kafka also knew that this is also Yojo Kaiju like the previous one. On the other hand, we see that at the place where Kaiju attacked, there is a child and his mother is buried under the rubble, and she was trying to get her mother out. But they had come to the site of Kaiju. Then Kaiju is about to attack them. Her mother is telling the girl to save her life. But then Kafka throws him miles away with a punch. Kafka was surprised by his new power. Then he tries to help the girl, but the girl was afraid to see Kafka. Kafka tries to be friendly by smiling, but his way scares the girl even more. In the end, Reno is the one who takes care of him. Reno tells him that his mother is still alive, but we see that the plan did not end in that attack. Kafka tells them all to retreat as he was about to finish them off in a single attack. He charges his body and lands a powerful punch on it. Yozo's body was blasted by this force, and its fragments spread throughout the city. Blood starts oozing out. Reno was now worried about what Kafka had become. Kafka tells Reno to take the child's mother to the hospital, but she was still afraid to see Kafka. Kafka comes to him and says that he is leaving from here, so there is no need to be afraid now. After which Kafka starts to leave from there. Only then the child gives voice to Kafka and says, thanks to him. The girl's thank you inspires a new hope in Kafka that he can still stand up to Mina and fight every kaiju with her. We see that the kaiju form of Kafka is beginning to disappear. After this, when the defense force comes there, they are surprised to see such a situation of Yojo. They try to talk to the girl, but she was very scared due to the accident. Mina promises her that she will eliminate every single kaiju, and the girl gets a little sad after hearing this, which also surprises Mina. The girl takes a promise from Mina that Mina will not kill the good kaiju. The girl's words startle Mina. Well, 3 months have passed since this accident, and the defense force is still trying to find the hospital kaiju, which they have given the code name Kaiju number 8. This was the first time in the history of the defense force that a kaiju had survived the defense force for so long. The results of Renault and Kafka have also come in these 3 months. Renault had passed the exam, and now it is going to give Kafka's result to him, but Renault itself was tense about Kafka's result. He checks Kafka's result and smiles. Kafka's friends also understood that this time Kafka has passed the exam. He tells this to Kafka, who was having lunch in his kaiju form. Reno beats him up and tells him to fix his face, but his teeth were still the same as the monster's. Shouting at him, he talks about how the defense force is searching for him all over the country like crazy. We learn that on that day, these people went back to the hospital and pretended in front of everyone as if they themselves were hiding in fear of kaiju. Well, Renault shows Kafka his result, but what Renault expected, Kafka was not so happy to see his result. The reason for this was that Kafka always fails the second test. Anyway, here's the big question. Is Kafka going to give his second test in this kaiju's body? Kafka says yes, and says that no one will know, while his mouth is back to kaiju's. So friends, to join the defense force, candidates have to pass 3 types of exams, in which the first is the written test and the second is the physical test, which Renault and Kafka are going to give. And about the third and last test you will find out further. Candidates from all over Japan come to take the exam to take the physical exam, and because Kafka is 32 years old, this is his last chance to join the defense force. Renault says that we will both be rivals in that field. He will not help him there. Kafka smiles and begins to open the lid of the bottle, which does not open, causing him to burst it as kaiju. Reno held up his hands. He was refusing to give Kafka an exam. Kafka falls at his feet and says he will hold his own until the exam, but Reno is not convinced and leaves. Now that Reno is gone, Kafka begins to talk to himself. He thinks that if he fails and Reno passes, then Reno will never call him sir. And now automatically, the kaiju form of Kafka starts disappearing. Well, his exam was going to be held at the Tachikawa base of the defense force, and after seeing the security here, he had an idea that if Kafka accidentally became kaiju here, then he would be immediately disposed of here. By the way, like those people, there are other candidates here, one of whom calls Kafka uncle. Kafka gets angry because he is only 32 years old. Reno tells him the truth that 32 is called uncle. Well, the girl was asking them to remove their van from here, because here she will park her G-Wagon, because today her lucky number is 5, which is the number of Kafka's parking point. Kafka gets angry, so the girl starts to take off her clothes, seeing which Kafka closes his eyes. We see that the girl was wearing some kind of suit, which was kind of charging. He had lifted their car with the help of a suit and thrown it. This girl's name is Kikaru Shinomiya, who is an exam candidate like her, whose hobby is to kill kaijus. And now she tells Kafka to be careful because she smelled kaiju inside Kafka. Renault handles the matter and says that we do the work of kaiju's disposal. That's when Kikoru's eyes go to Kafka, who had lifted a heavy van on his hands. Kafka becomes cool and says that the name Kafka Hibino will be remembered, little girl. For Kikoru, this exam was just a formality, but after being impressed by Kafka, he is now going to have a lot of fun defeating Kafka. And having said this, Kikoru leaves from there. But for now, Kafka will have to bear the brunt of Renault's anger. Kafka explains to him that he only transformed what he could not see. But Renault is not convinced. Then the security there scolds them and sends them inside. Now the fitness test starts, and from the beginning, Kafka was having a very wasteful performance. His age of 32 was becoming a barrier between the young ends. Among 225 candidates, Kafka's number is 219, while Kiko's position was 5th, which she reminds Kafka of by showing him. Kafka tearfully tells him, "Out of my mouth I will die." But Reno was proud of Kafka that he did not cheat by using his power in the exam. Kafka also thought that if he played honestly, he would look great, but now he was regretting because now he would hardly be able to pass. Reno tells him that the problem was not his age, but that this time all the candidates are veterans, especially Kiko Shinomiya, who completed her graduation from California neutralization at the age of 16. The biggest competition here was Kiko, from which Kafka took panga as soon as he arrived. Then Kiko comes crying to Kafka and says, "Then you know the truth." Kafka was very surprised to learn the truth of Kiriko. He grabs Kiriko by force, and Kafka is washed by Kiriko's bodyguards. After this, Kiriko teases him and leaves from there. Kafka challenges her that she will defeat him, but before that, she has to pass the exam. Reno gives him a wonderful news that for the last 2 years, the task of cleaning Kaiju's body in the 3rd exam is given. This will show the candidate's knowledge of Kaiju, and that is why Reno worked part-time to dispose of Kaiju's body. Now we learn that this exam is going to be under the supervision of Vice Captain Hoshino, and his real exam was to find Kaiju and eliminate him. Both Kafka and Reno were shocked, but it was not like they would be thrown in front of such a Kaiju. All the candidates will be provided with the Izumo Tech gear suit. This is the same suit that officers wear when facing Kaiju. This suit increases the ability of a normal human many times, but it also matters who is wearing this suit. This suit made of Kaiju's body completely sticks to the body of the officers, as if it is a part of their own body. Reno was able to use 8% of the power of this suit. The candidate named Hachi was able to use 18% of the power of this suit. Aikagura was able to use 15% of the power of this suit. Iru was able to use 18% of the power of this suit. In fact, this is a very good number, because despite good training, many officers never grow beyond 20%. But Kiko Shinomiya surprised everyone there. She was using 49% power of this suit, which was the highest score among the candidates so far. But there was another person who had made history there. Kafka Hibino, whose unleashed power was showing 0. Till date, no candidate has come forward who is not able to use even 1% of the power of the suit. It was almost impossible. Kafka couldn't understand why this was happening to him. At the same time, Kiko feels that he is playing a game with Kafka because she had already seen a sample of Kafka's strength in the parking lot. Among them was another man whose Kafka entertainment had become. In the field where the exam was going to be held, there was a big Hoju Kaiju and 36 Yuju Kaiju. These are the same Kaijus who killed 16 people last year. Obviously, the lives of these people could also be lost in this exam, and that is why all the candidates were being monitored through drones. If it seems that a candidate's life is in danger, the shield in their suit will be activated, but at the same time, he will be failed in the exam. Despite this, there was not a wrinkle on anyone's face, and everyone jumped into the field. Kiko uses the power of her suit to kill 2 Yuju in a different way. At the same time, Kafka, who had given the challenge to defeat Kiko, was not able to pick up the gun without the power of the suit. Then it is announced among all the candidates that Captain Mina of the 3rd Division has also come to see this exam. Kafka remembers the promise he made to Mina. He starts thinking with a calm mind and feels that so many drones should not be used to keep an eye on every moment. In fact, the examiners were also judging how each candidate adapts to each situation. Kafka, together with Reno, decided to give support to every attacker. All the Yuju who were left in this field could not see, but their ability to hear was very sharp. That is why a sound bomb was deliberately given in the suit of all the candidates. Kafka had also helped everyone by telling Yuju's weakness. The vice captain was also surprised to see Kafka's sudden improvement. Kafka's confidence had grown that he could pass the exam even without his own powers. Just then, another Yuju attacks them. This sudden attack had damaged Kafka's bones and some sensitive organs. Kafka was left unable to get up, and his shield was about to be activated. Kafka was still trying to get up as Mina was watching him. That Kaiju had also come very close to him, and the shield was about to be activated. Then Kiriko comes there, and she saved Kafka from being disqualified by killing Yuju. She says no one can lose without her. Kiriko, after teasing Kafka, turned directly to Hanju. Now that Kafka's leg was broken, it was almost impossible for him to continue in the exam. He is advised to give up, but Kafka's passion was not letting him give up. Her human spirit increases the suit's unleash power by 0.0. He was back on his feet, probably because of the suit. The vice captain also gives him permission to continue. Kafka tells Renault to go ahead regardless, as he said before the exam, but Renault stands by him. Kafka also knew Renault's zeal very well. Renault runs away with Kafka on his back. Seeing this, the laughter of Vice Captain Hoshino was not stopping. Now Renault was also a little ashamed. He used the power of his suit and started running even faster. On the other hand, Kiko Shinomiya, after finishing all the Yojus, first throws a grenade at Hoju, causing him to scream in pain. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Kiko stands on her mouth and launches a powerful attack on her mouth with a unique bullet. That Hoju had died and the exam was also over. All the drones are called back and a medical team is sent for the injured. This performance of Kiko had caught the attention of even Mina, and it was the first time that the exam ended so quickly and no one was out in the exam. After all, what else can be expected from the daughter of the director? After proving herself to her father, she was going to mock Kafka for the 4th time, but then we see another Kaiju behind Kiko who had shot at Kiko's heart. Suddenly, the dead Yojus start coming back to life, and their color also changes. Kafka also felt the presence of a strong Kaiju. We see that by applying the full force of his suit, Kiko had saved his heart, and this suit made from the body of Kaiju begins to heal his injury. Kiko had also surprised the Kaiju that he was still alive after his attack. Kiko was also surprised that this Kaiju could talk like humans. Even his thoughts were like human beings. He had sustained serious injuries on his body. The department was also wondering how the dead Kaijus could come back to life. Scientists say that the fortitude of the revived Hoju is showing 42.6.4, which means that it will take the entire defense force to defeat it. He returns to the unknown Kaiju and disappears into the smoke. Now we see that the form of that Hoju has changed absolutely. Vice Captain Hoshino knew very well that in the 3rd division, only 2 people can defeat it. First, Captain Mina, and second, he himself. Kiko was trying to get up while healing her injury, but Hoju slams her into the wall. She was badly injured in it, but she did not give up because Kiko had to be perfect for her father. Kiko Shinomiya had always been the topper. Often everyone praised him, but he never got what everyone had. Kiko's father never appreciated her. He wanted his daughter to be perfect, who could do something for her dead mother and this country. Remembering these things, Kiko stands once again. But despite her efforts, she was not able to stand in front of that Hoju, even for a moment. One of his hands was badly injured. That Hoju was charging his body for a powerful attack by enlarging his sting. Captain Mina and Vice Captain Hoshino were still far from the field. Kiko had accepted his defeat. That Hoju had also attacked Kiko, and that's when Kiko sees Kafka in front of her. That attack destroyed a large part of it, but they both survive because of Kafka's power. We learn that as soon as Kafka found out about Kiko fighting alone with Hoju, he immediately disappeared to save her. Here Kiko was also confused that Kafka is a Kaiju. Kafka looks at him and begs Kiko not to tell anyone. That's when Hoju does the energy blast again, but Kafka had deflected that attack with his own hand. Now he's back to charging his body. Here a signal of a new kaiju was being shown in the monitor, whose fortitude was 99.8, which was the largest fortitude in the kaijus seen till date, and it was exactly near the same Hoju. They avoid this by thinking that it will be a system glitch, otherwise it will be the most powerful kaiju in history. Here Kafka lands a punch on that Hoju with all his strength, due to which the skin starts disappearing from his bones. His body trembles. Kafka, striking the dialogue, says, "Now show up alive." The body of that Yoju actually starts reacting. Kafka bursts out and begins to apologize to her. After this, Hoju again dies. Kafka then looks horribly at Kiko and kills the Yoju behind him. Kafka tells her that he will not let anything happen to her and at the same time explains to her that she should not put herself in such danger. Then Reno says the same thing while killing Kafka. Kafka begins to explain that the problem itself was so big. Meanwhile, he falls unconscious. After some time, we see that Mina and Hoshino have reached the site, but Hoju was already killed. Hoshino remembers something after seeing such a condition of Hoju. That's when they get an update that 3 more inmates have reached the safe shelter. Hoshino suspected that the accident was linked to the same case that had occurred 9 months earlier. The next day at the hospital, we learn that Kafka was not seriously injured and that Kiko is better than ever. After all, the best technology was being used in his treatment, which Kafka did not like. After all, why is he getting special treatment when Kiko's injury was also more? Today, Kafka has learned a great lesson that while chasing your dream, there is always someone who is better than you and can take away your dream. That is why even if Kafka fails today, he will not regret it, because this time he gave it his all. For this, he thanks Reno for even engaging him. Mina, who was standing outside, was also listening to them, and that's when she comes in and says thank you for helping Kiko. Kafka wanted to talk to her, but he has decided that he will talk to Mina only if there is a Defense Force uniform on her body. On the other hand, Kikoru was apologizing to her father because this time she wasn't perfect. B comes there to meet Vice Captain Hoshino, who came to thank him for killing that Hoju. Garu's heart is sad to hear this because the truth was something else. Captain Hoshino, seeing the disappointment on his face, asks him, "Didn't that happen?" Garu says that he was the one who finished that Hoju. By the way, today's frightening incident was also being broadcast on TV, which the unknown Kazu was also listening to in the public toilet. He wondered who would have killed his so powerful Hoju. And all of a sudden, his phone rings. It was the call of his companions who were telling him to come out soon. This Kazu makes his body in human form. Along with him were Kafka's old friends, who are unaware of the reality of this Kazu. A few months later, Kafka and Reno were back at work, waiting for the results. And today their result is going to come, about which Kafka was very torn. That's when his boss tells him that the letters of his name have come. This was Kafka's last chance. Will he ever be able to pass the exam and stand at par with Mina? Now the scene shifts to the Defense Force headquarters, where all the past candidates were gathered. Among them was Reno, but Kafka was nowhere to be seen. We learn that Kikoru's childhood friend is also in the same division. It is here that Reno meets Iharu, and the two become good friends at their first meeting. Iharu asks Reno about Kafka. Reno was a little disappointed as well. That's when Captain Mina comes on stage to welcome all the new officers, and because Kikoru had topped, he is also called on stage to take the oath. After the end of the oath, Mina once again thanks Kikoru for handling the sudden mess that happened in the middle of the exam. However, Kikoru knew full well that she did not deserve all these congratulations. There his eyes were looking for Kafka, and that's when the naughty Kafka enters the room. Kikoru is shocked to see him. Many people there were surprised to see Kafka. In fact, Kafka had failed the exam, on which Mina was also about to speak, but then Hoshino says that he will keep him in his division. It was obvious that Kafka's marks could not make him pass in any way, but not thinking about his points during the exam and giving support to others, even finding out Kazu's weakness, were all a big reason to give Kafka another chance. And at the same time, the boy is very funny. So before making Kafka a full officer, he will be trained and tried. And that's why Kafka was excluded from the oath ceremony. Despite this, Many people were happy to see Kafka here. Now, while ending the ceremony, Mina gives the ending speech. At first, she congratulates everyone for passing this difficult exam, but now the difficulties are going to increase further. In these few years, the number of Kaijus and their strength has increased. In some cases, dead Kaijus have been seen coming back to life. It was obvious that the journey ahead of them is going to be very difficult, in which many people will also lose their lives. But despite this, Mina wants everyone to trust her. He will protect everyone. Kafka shouts Mina's name that he always stands by her. Everyone was looking at Kafka. Kafka had accidentally spoken so loudly, but as a punishment for taking the name of a senior, he is given a penalty of 100 push-ups. Hoshino couldn't stop laughing. He tells Mina that he has given less punishment to Kafka, but then he sees Mina smiling. By the way, we also get to know the real reason for keeping Hoshino's Kafka here. In fact, when the dead Kaiju was coming back to life, there was also a Kaiju whose amplitude was 99.8, which he had ignored at that time. But there was someone else whose vital organs suddenly stopped appearing. At the same time, Kafka is quite mysterious. He was the first one whose suit's amplitude was showing 0. Hoshino suspects that the truth is in front of him, but hidden from him. Now that Kafka's push-ups are complete, Kikoru asks him to walk with him. Iharu is amused and asks, "Are you going to propose her?" At which Kikoru gets angry and beats Kafka and brings him with her. After this, Kafka tells him the whole story from the hospital to now. Kikoru couldn't believe how someone could eat Kaiju when they were hungry. Kafka feels that he should tell this to the defense force. Maybe he could find a cure. Kikoru forbids him to even think about it because the powerful Kazu are killed and weapons are made for the defense force. Surely the same will be done with Kafka, or various experiments will be done on his body every day. Kafka begs her not to tell this to anyone, and being so close to her, Kikoru separates her by killing her and saying that Kafka saved her life. That's why she will stay calm. But if she finds out that Kafka is going to kill humans by becoming Kazu, she will kill Kafka herself. Rino is horrified to hear this. Kafka smiles and says, "Yes, if that happens, kill me." From this day onwards, Rino began to work harder in his training. His shooting practice time was 2 minutes 35 seconds, and he was now able to use 18% of the suit's power. But because of this, he has also got a competitor with a friend, Iharu, whose timing was 2 minutes 15 seconds, and now he was able to use 20% of the power of his suit. But beating both of them, Kikoru timed 1 minute 16 seconds, and now she was able to use 55% of the power of her suit. Haruichi and Ako had also found their competitors. At the same time, Kafka, whose shooting time was 6 minutes 39 seconds, was now able to use 1% of the power of his suit. That's what he was most happy to do. The vice captain tells him that if this continues, Kafka will be shown the way out in 9 months. And finishing today's training, he asks everyone to do 15 rounds of the field. Now after the training, everyone had come to take a hot water bath, where Iharu was showing off his muscles Rino, and that's when Kafka shows his muscles to everyone, which Rino and Iharu were surprised to see. But Kafka was trying to hide his baldness by holding his breath, in which he fails and becomes a joke. But then Ako comes there to take a bath, seeing whose body everyone jumps into the water out of shame. On the other hand, Kiko had also come to take a bath with her friends, but Mina was already there. Mina asks them to come in. She was going to leave anyway. Kiko notices Mina's body muscles here, which were just the right amount, and Mina's combat power is also very high. So Kiko asks her the reason behind it. Mina asks him to stand next to her. She was going to teach him her basic exercise. And on the other hand, there was talk among the boys about the reason for their joining the defense force. When Iharu was in school, Mina saved his life from a kaiju. Since then, he wants to be like Mina. The reason for everyone to join the defense force there was somehow Mina. Now Iharu asks Kafka's reason, and Kafka tells them everything truthfully. He had told that he and Mina were childhood friends. They had also made childhood promises. He told his story to everyone. They wanted to know more about Mina, for which they were ready to climb Kafka. but due to staying in the water for a long time, their condition had deteriorated, but everyone was working hard with heart and soul to improve themselves. Meanwhile, Mina's tiger may have recognized Kafka's real identity, but he suddenly finds himself confused. But despite such hard training, Kafka was not showing any special progress, but Reno and everyone were definitely supporting him. One such night, Kafka was studying late at night when Vice Captain Hoshino comes there, who came to advise him that along with hard work, rest is also necessary. He already knew the reason for Kafka's so much hard work because everything spoken in the dome is recorded. Vice Captain asks Kafka, "Do I understand that you are trying to take my place?" Kafka began to refuse in a rush, but the truth was that yes, he would stay in her place. That's what he accepts here. Captain Hoshino forcefully strikes the table and gives Kafka 2 hours, after which he goes to rest in his room by turning off the light and locking the door. But yes, he also says that he will not let Kafka take his place. At the same time, he tells Kafka not to be attached to anyone because there is no guarantee of life in his work. That's when the emergency alarm starts ringing loudly throughout the base. It was a Kaiju alert, meaning it was time for their first mission. A huge Honju has been seen in Sagamiya, with a large number of Yoju Kaiju around and inside it. Mina says that she will take care of Honju alone and asks others to cooperate with her. The work of moving the common people away from Sagamiya was started, and the defense force was also out to eliminate all those Kaiju. Kiko is still not convinced that the Kafka in front of her is the same Kaiju number 8, but she has high hopes for Kafka. Then Kafka started vomiting and Kiko was sitting right in front of him. Due to the panic of the mission, Kafka had eaten something more. Well, the defense force plans that Honju will be hit in the central area of this city, so that the city is harmed as little as possible. Although Honju is quite large, the real danger is the small Yoju that he is making. The task of all the officers was to somehow keep all the Yojus in the central area, for which the officers of all the divisions are divided into multiple rows, and the batch of Kafka was engaged in the last row. Mina would also have reached her position in 8 minutes. Kafka has a good chance to prove himself, but he is scared, nervous, and in pain at the same time about this mission. Despite this, he was excited because this was the work that Kafka had always wanted to do. Only then they get a report of the appearance of Yoju in Sector 8. They all jump straight out of the building. Kafka was also excited to make his first mission a memorable one, and he begins to climb out of the building. At the same time, Mina had reached her place, from where she was going to shoot Honju. To harm Honju as much as possible, the military does support firing on Honju, but there was hardly any effect on that Honju. The batch of Kafka was also waiting for the arrival of Yoju in Sector 8. But this time, Kafka was not frightened. Rather, he was able to feel the boundless power of the suit. And even then, a Yoju stumbles upon him and throws him into the garbage can. Kiko was scolding him that his combat power is at 1, yet he had gone so far. The slightly older officers are disturbed by his actions. They taunt him and tell him to hide somewhere safe, which hurts Kiko's ego. These officers also had difficulty in facing Yoju because these people did not know his weakness. And that's when Kiko had comfortably finished them off. The officers were also surprised to see Kiko's strength. Kafka also praises Kiko, and Kiko is embarrassed to hear her praise from Kafka's mouth. And then the system detects that Kiko's heartbeat is increasing very fast, so Kiko screams and tells Kafka to shut his mouth. In fact, Kiko was not the only one. Everyone in the new batch was doing well because they were also giving competition to each other with the battle. Reino was also using blue bullets instead of green bullets according to his type, which slow down his hunting speed. Rano wants to make himself as strong as possible so that Kafka never needs to become Kaiju. Platoon leader was also impressed with the new batch, especially with their personality. But that wasn't the case in this case. Those who are doing well here are motivating others to do better. But only Kafka was there who could not help anyone. He was depressed about it. It is then that he remembers somewhere those officers how they have not yet found out the weakness of Yoju. He finds a dead Yoju behind him, and using 1% of his suit's power, he rips off Yoju's body. The body of this Yoju was like a fungus, but its core was not where every Kaiju often is. Then Kafka is surprised to see one thing. He tells Vice Captain Hoshina about Yoju's core, which was at the base of his neck, which is covered by a tough fiber. That is why they have to be attacked from the side to eliminate the core. And what was surprising was that on the lower part of these yojus are the reproductive organs. If they are not destroyed, more yojus will be born from the killed yojus. Hoshina was impressed with Kafka's work, and the information about his reproductive organs and the core of that yoju is conveyed to all the team. Now Kafka was also feeling good that he was able to come in handy for his team. He thinks he can destroy all the reproductive organs. Suddenly, a fire broke out. Everyone together was trying to weaken that Honju, but there was no effect of any attack on him. Mina had also targeted him. I want to tell you that Mina is able to use 96% of the power of her suit, due to which the attack with her weapon is very powerful. And that's why Mina has to get permission before attacking. The first shot destroys Honju's body, and in the second shot his core was destroyed. In the third shot, it is confirmed that Honju has been killed. But despite this, Mina did not stop attacking. She was probably telling Kafka who has become a better defense force officer. At the same time, Hoshina comes to Kafka and asks if he will ever be able to gather enough strength to fight standing next to Mina. So Kafka's opposite asks him if he can do something on his own, to which Hoshina proudly refuses. The combat power of Hoshina is nothing special in the case of long-range or large kaiju, but when it comes to small or medium-sized kaiju, there is no one better than him here. He didn't even move, yet he had scattered Honju on the ground. Vice Captain Hoshina, whose special weapon is two small katana by the way, the giant Kai Honju has been killed, but the battle is not over yet. The countless yojus who grew up inside that Honju are now rapidly coming out. By now, all the new officers are exhausted, their combat power has become very weak. Vice Captain Hoshina tells us that most officers spend their entire career in combat power at 20%. Kaguya was the only one who broke this limit as soon as she arrived. But Hoshina sees potential inside Reno too. On the other hand, we see Reno and Iharu together. Both of them were going towards Sector Fox because there has been a report that a new kaiju has been seen there. But when both of them reached there, a sanitation worker was present there before them. They don't know what it's doing here, but we know it's looking for reproductive organs inside dead yojus. He was surprised that all the reproductive organs had been found and destroyed. Iharu gets angry and asks him to go to a safe place from here. But the man points his finger at Iharu and shoots him. Iharu was saved by a bullet that hit him just above his heart. We see that it was the same unknown kaiju that was seen during the exam. They both knew it. They both tried to report to the base, but this kaiju has separated this part from the outside world, due to which they will not be able to contact anyone. Now, he makes the same attack on Kaiju Reno, but Reno's speed makes him doubt his own M. Although Reno was injured, but what Kiko had told them in the cafe was that his fingers pump before this unknown kaiju attacks. By noticing this very thing, Reno was able to save his sensitive organs again and again. But he understood that too. Reno's bullets also have no effect on this. He asks Iharu to go and call a backup from here. He immediately refuses, but then another murderous attack occurs on him. But he was saved by Reno. Reno once again begs him to leave. Iharu listens to him and leaves from there. Even Reno was afraid that Koru would not be able to stand in front of him. But despite this, he is standing here and fighting because he has to become a defense force officer like Kafka, who saves the lives of his comrades without caring about his own life. On the other side, Iharu falls while running. Actually, he was deep in thought. The Renault, which was able to use only 8% of the power of its suit, has increased to 18% today, while it is stuck at 20% for the last 2 weeks. Vice Captain Hoshina had told him that most officers use only 20% to 30% of the power of the suit in their entire career, but everyone has the ability to break it. Iharu thinks that ever since he dreamed of joining the defense force, every single day he's been pushing to make himself strong. But Reno passed him like it wasn't a big deal. There, on the other hand, that Kaiju had also realized that his general attacks on Reno would not work. That's why he takes out his 2 more hands, and this time he had pumped all his fingers together. But before the attack can hit Reno, Iharu saves him. Iharu had realized the lack inside him. In fact, Iharu has not changed since that day. Every time someone had to come to save him, He speaks to Reno with a smile. Reno, you're not me, I'm saving you. Now that Kaiju also realized that Reno was trying to drive Iharu away, but it would be of no use. This Kaiju has created Nemat species in this area. Without this Kaiju's will, no one can enter it or leave it. Now Reno and Iharu together attack that Kaiju. Iharu was giving backup from behind. He was also trying out different bullets, like the Reno. These are conductor round bullets that paralyze the body of the enemy. Kaiju Iharu thinks of finishing an easy target first, but by now, Iharu had also understood the timing of his attack, and he paralyzes his legs for a while with the conductor bullet. To take full advantage of this opportunity, Reno was trying its best to break the limit of its combat power. Kaiju's body parts start to scatter around, but after the smoke clears, we learn that Kaiju had gathered a pile of dead Yojo in front of him. He suddenly walks out and chops up Reno's body. On the other hand, the Force had also realized that Reno and Iharu have not been able to contact for some time. Kafka was worried about him. That's when he sees a dead Yojo's body reacting. Both Kafka and Kiko understood who had returned. Reno, on the other hand, had almost lost his consciousness, but he was still trying to stop his bleeding and then trying to stand up. Iharu's conductor rounds were also now ineffective, after which he damages Iharu's hands and feet. And as much as Reno was trying to get up, he was just as smitten with Kaiju. Iharu was angry with himself that his partner was being killed in front of him and he was not able to do anything. He had accepted that Reno is stronger than him, and maybe one day he will become the captain too. That's why he doesn't want Reno to end like this. He picks up the gun and attacks Kaiju, but that gun had run out of bullets. Everything was over. That Kaiju had pointed his finger back. Iharu God or evil, whichever supreme being really exists, was begging him for his friend's life. He was about to eliminate Kaiju Reno, but this time there was a demonic entity standing behind him who separated that Kaiju's head from the torso in a single punch. This is where our explanation ends, but the episode is still pending. So see you in the next part. Until then, goodbye and take care, and support me, friends.